In the last week, sacredness keeps coming up in a number of different contexts. Lacking sacred space, inattention to it, connection with land and earth, and what happens when we lose that connection. Maybe it's just that phenomenon where when you learn something new or hear something surprising, then you hear it everywhere for a little bit, the frequency bias. But I think it might be that the universe is trying to tell me something. Some folks would consider sacredness only ascribed to objects and places that are used for a religious purpose. But whose religion? And what purpose? I would argue that sacredness names the process of the holy or transcendent inherent in all creatures and things being made known. Everything in the web of life is sacred. Sacredness is in the interplay of all living things. A forest is sacred not because we observe it, but because within it, foxes and bugs, plants and birds are living out their lives. And sometimes, if we're lucky, we get to experience that wonder and interconnection. A space made by people, like this one, can also be sacred, a place to encounter transcendence and wonder, a building, a clearing in the woods, a garden. Spaces and cultures made by people can also sometimes make it hard for us to experience the sacred, cutting off our connection to the web of life, to gratitude and wonder. Each of us is sacred. We are tiny pieces of a collective, wondrous, transcendent whole. But how often do we act as if that were true? Do we treat ourselves and others as sacred? What would it mean to do so? I think that this may be one of the fundamental spiritual nutrients that we are lacking broadly, and that in part is causing harm in our culture. There are many different paths toward compassion, gratitude, wonder, connection with the sacred and all that is, but choosing no path has left so many of us adrift. Yesterday at Berkshire Pride, Chelsea and Rachel and I were talking about embodiment. They were trying to help me think through my topic for today, and thank you. Chelsea asked if I had ever read The Body Is Not an Apology. I hadn't, but I am now. The author is Sonia Renee Taylor, and if you look her up, you've probably seen her or her work out in the world. She's an activist, poet, speaker, artist, and educator on issues of radical self-love, social justice, and personal and global transformation. Taylor writes, "Humans are a varied and divergent bunch with all manner of beliefs, morals, values, and ideas. We have struggled to find agreement on much of anything over the centuries, but here is a completely non-controversial statement I think we have consensus around. You, my dear, have a body. And should you desire to remain on this spinning rock hurtling through space, you will need a body to do it. When we speak of the ills of the world, violence, poverty, injustice, we're not speaking conceptually, we're talking about things that happen to bodies. When we say millions around the world are impacted by an epidemic of famine, what we are saying is that millions of humans are experiencing the physical deterioration of muscle and other tissue due to lack of nutrition in their bodies. Injustice is an opaque word until we're willing to discuss its material reality, as, for example, The 3 years 16-year-old Khalif Browder spent beaten and locked in solitary confinement at Rikers Island Prison without ever being charged with a single crime. His suicide and his mother's heart attack 2 years later are not abstractions. They are the outcome of injustice enacted on 2 bodies. Racism, sexism, ableism, homo and transphobia, ageism, fatphobia are algorithms created by human struggle to make peace with the body. A radical self-love world is a world that works for every body. Creating such a world is an inside-out job. How we value and honor our own bodies impacts how we value and honor the bodies of others. Like I said, you should read it too. That's just from the prologue. Bodies are sacred. Our bodies connect us to the web of life, to the universe. In my garden, the gorgeous peonies, which I did not plant, but enjoy every year, are bursting open. The spinach doubled in size overnight from the rain on Friday. The potatoes' greens doubled in size. There are still a lot of seeds for us to plant, but every time I walk through, I try to remember to thank and cheer on the growing things. I tell them out loud what a great job they're doing. I don't know if it helps the plants at all, but it does help me. The list of chores for the garden is overwhelming, and sometimes I can forget that it's supposed to be fun, or at least a restorative practice. In addition to the practical gift of growing food we will eat through the winter. When I walk through my garden and cheer on my plants, I think back to the generations of farmers in my family who lived and died on what came up and what didn't every year. It's easier than ever for folks in many parts of the world to be disconnected from how we are part of the earth, not just walking around on top of it. Stories and practices that help us experience the sacredness and wonder of being in these particular bodies, doing remarkable things as part of the web of life, are healing and restorative for us as individuals and for our communities. For those of us who are living in places with access to beautiful views, mountains, rivers, lakes, streams, we are reminded and surrounded by sacred space. And yet, it can be easy to forget that this includes us. As Sonia Renee Taylor wrote, how we value and honor our own bodies impacts how we value and honor the bodies of others. I don't know that thanking my plants and talking to them changes them, but I am changed by my relationship with them. How might we be changed by opening ourselves to the sacred in different ways? To embody, to live into the reality that our bodies are sacred, that the web of life is sacred, that gratitude and wonder at the power and connection of sacredness and all that is to move toward healing in our broken and bruised places. For those whose bodies have been marginalized, commodified, violated, or ignored, you are sacred. You are a sacred being among sacred beings in sacred space. You are known. All of us have the transcendent wonder of all that is as part of us. We are part of a sacred whole. With gratitude, may we live into honoring the sacred in us all. So may it be.